Hey there, author and freelance writer Melissa May Younger here, and today is day 4 of Vlogmas, and today I'm talking about A Christmas Carol, which is a very famous Christmas story and a very important one in our culture because obviously it stood the test of time. It is everywhere at Christmas. You can't go anywhere without seeing some kind of allusion to A Christmas Carol, to Scrooge, to the Three Ghosts, that sort of thing. All those themes and motifs are very popular. And so I just wanted to kind of break down some different elements of the story, just talk about why, it's such a compelling story, look at the structure of it. And then as a writer, I'm interested in, well, how do I reproduce something like that? Not to get too utilitarian, but, using that as a model of a really good, powerful story. So just a little bit of background and history. In 1843, Dickens did not set out to write a Christmas story. Instead, he was focused on trying to solve the problems of poverty and child labor in his days. If you've read other things by him, he's done political writings and that sort of thing. And he had read a government report on child labor, and he initially thought that he might respond with a pamphlet. He thought maybe a pamphlet would reach some people, but why don't I just present my ideas in a Christmas story since it's around Christmas time? It says in his preface, I have endeavored in this ghostly little book to raise the ghost of an idea, which shall put my readers out of humor with themselves, with each other, with the season, or with me. May it haunt their houses pleasantly, and no one wish to lay it. So he was very much writing with a social agenda, that he wanted to raise some issues in his day that he saw, especially concerning the poor. He more specifically introduces the radical idea that employers are responsible for the well-being of their employees, and their workers are not of value only to the extent to which they contribute to a product for the cheapest possible labor. And these messages are very relevant today in our culture too, right? But usually when people think of A Christmas Carol, they don't think about these types of messages. They just think about the transformation of the character. So just with that lens, we're going to be delving into the story. So the first two characters that we meet in the story are Scrooge and his nephew Fred. And they have these very contrasting opinions about Christmas, right? This is a really common Christmas trope. The one who loves Christmas, the one who hates Christmas. And the one who loves Christmas obviously is good and loves good things and is joyful and all of that. And these ideas continue to be in dialogue with each other throughout the story. And Scrooge is of the opinion that Christmas is a time for paying bills without money, a time for finding yourself a year older, but not an hour richer, a time for balancing your books and having every item in them through a round dozen of months presented dead against you. So he gives this sobering picture of just this cold-hearted, one-sided economic concern about Christmas. It's just draining your pocket. And so Dickens already makes us dislike Scrooge and the way he feels about Christmas. And then Fred, on the other hand, he offers this foil to Scrooge, and he talks about it in a more whimsical and idealistic way. He says, I have always thought of Christmas time, when it has come round, apart from the veneration due to its sacred name and origin, if anything belonging to it can be apart from that, as a good time, a kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time, the only time I know of in the long calendar of the year when men and women seem by one consent to open their shut-up hearts freely and to think of people below them as if they really were fellow passengers to the grave, and not another race of creatures bound on other journeys. And therefore, uncle, though it has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe it has done me good and will do me good, and I say, God bless it. So in the end of the story, of course, we know that the latter view wins out and Scrooge gets more converted to his nephew's view. And his hardness of heart towards Christmas actually shows his hardness of heart towards his fellow men, humanity. And that's because the way that Dickens is presenting Christmas is it's a time of charity, and that's been forgotten. And Scrooge just doesn't see any sense in charity, because why would you give your money away to poor people, right? He thinks they're all lazy, they are idle, and that they should go get a job, while he's also paying his workers barely anything and then trying to make them work on Christmas Day. The kind of poor, hard-working person who really just wants to do well, is virtuous, but really can't seem to pay the bills is Bob Cratchit. And Scrooge chastises Cratchit for wanting to take the whole day off for Christmas. And he's saying, you still expect me to pay you for it, and he sees it as an unfair expense, and he likens it to picking a man's pocket. So he's saying that, you're doing this dishonest thing by taking a day off and expecting me still to pay you for it, because Bob Cratchit can't afford to not be paid for a day. As we know, Scrooge goes on a journey that night, and he goes to the very people that he was so quick to write off. And it says in the story, the spirit stood beside sick beds, and they were cheerful. On foreign lands, and they were close at home. By struggling men, and they were patient in their greater hope. By poverty, and it was rich. In almshouse, hospital, and jail, and misery's every refuge, where vain man in his little brief authority had not made fast the door and barred the spirit out, he left his blessing and taught Scrooge his precepts. And so basically the spirit is taking him all around to all these people who are poor and who Scrooge is looking down on, and he's offering them comfort, and he's showing Scrooge, well, actually, they have this wealth that you know nothing about, which is caring about other people, and they have more charity than you do. And then we also see the results of poverty. So one result is sickness and even death. And Scrooge himself won't even escape death despite his wealth. And Fred aptly states at the beginning of the book that we are all fellow passengers to the grave. Basically, we're all going to die. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, so why not be charitable and giving to people along the way? And at the end of the tale, Scrooge has already seen illness and death from the ghost of the Christmas present, and then he is shown his own death by the ghost of the Christmas yet to come, and he sees that he is alone and friendless at the end of his days, and then he sees the legacy that he leaves, and that he's indirectly responsible for the death of Tiny Tim because he didn't pay his father enough to be able to get the medical care for Tiny Tim that he really needed. And then another theme is fate. And when Scrooge is shown his dismal future, this question arises, can Scrooge change his destiny? That's his main concern, because he sees, not only have I harmed other people, but I'm going to be remembered as the stingy miser that I am. And then Scrooge appeals to his logic, saying, well, why would you be showing me these things if I couldn't change them? And so he promises to change them. And he says, I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach. And so he's learned from these spirits, and he's brought to this desperate point that he has to change, right? If he doesn't change, then he's seen the end for him and others. But our story concludes with some good news, because Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all and infinitely more. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city knew, or any good old city, town, or borough in the good old world. So Scrooge does change his fate. That kind of answers our question for us. and he learns what the spirits taught him, and he keeps that in his heart. I think that when we think of A Christmas Carol, we usually talk about it in terms of somebody, who doesn't care about others now cares about others. And that's true. That is definitely a strong message there. But it's more than that, right? It's not just this feeling. There's a lot of actions behind it. There's a lot of actions behind, him not caring about others, in that he's literally underpaying his workers, expecting them to work overtime for him. And then he goes to the other extreme of he is providing extra benefits. He brings this whole Christmas dinner to one of his workers' house. And I would love to hear, your thoughts about it, and, anything that you've picked up or learned over the years, or what that story means to you. If you like videos talking about themes, about literature, or if you like videos about writing or publishing, you can leave a like below if you like this video, subscribe, leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you.